So anyway, getting back to Kyle Bass, let me just kind of remind everyone that as he had failures after the financial crisis, he began to get more desperate. He wanted to be in the media. I believe I think maybe his last success was something in the sovereign debt crisis, although that was all overhyped. I read somewhere where, let me see, in fact, if I have it here. Yeah, I can't find it. You can look it up. Value Walk. Value Walk is a scam. It's a scam boiler room website, by the way, that promotes these hucksters and doomsday guys and all their bullshit. There's something I can already tell you. They're in bed with it's not a neutral, unbiased website. It's a dangerous website because they're manipulators. But anyway, so Value Walk wrote an article that said something like Kyle Bass bet against Greek CDS derivatives, credit default swaps, right? And he made $10 billion. I mean, this is just nonsense. It's insanity. But anyway, so Kyle Bass, as he got more desperate, and I saw this unfolding, especially, and I keep forgetting to expose, what is it? Financial Sense and Poplova Securities, right? Jim Poplova, this scumbag. That's what he is. He's a complete scumbag. And by the way, for those of you who know Financial Sense, doomsday bullshit. They were promoting all this hyperinflation, Petership, doomsday shit. They finally got off that bandwagon, right? But you take a look at all their little contributors now, and they're all the same tribe. And I got discriminated when I was publishing there. They interviewed me for America's Financial Apocalypse. I got completely discriminated against because I don't have the right last name. I saw that clearly, how I was being treated unfairly. When meanwhile, people with the right last name, who were idiots and morons, they were overshadowing me. They were giving them all this publicity. And I've talked about this before, folks. I've lived this stuff. When I talk about the advantage, I've lived it. I continue to see it. And now I understand that historically why there's been so many problems, why people don't like. I see why, okay? Because they pull this same shit over and over again. They discriminate against people who are not else, right? They discriminate and they favor their own. And when you control huge industries and you do that, especially in the media, think about that. This is why the media is a scam. It's all about rewarding their buddies and screwing you. Anyway, I'll get to that some other time. I've talked about that for years. But so, as you saw Kyle Bass, Mr. Bass, which by the way, I've asked colleagues and they claim otherwise, but I can guarantee you, based upon circumstantial evidence, Mr. Bass is part of the tribe. He would probably deny it, but there's too much circumstantial evidence. Somebody should ask me at some point in the future on a live stream or webinar about the circumstantial evidence that I have, and I'll tell you. I'll just go ahead and give you one right now. There's the last name. But anyway, so, and there's many other pieces of evidence, by the way. I'll go ahead and drop another piece of evidence. His father was manager of the Fountain Blue in Miami, okay, which was a very fun hotel. Hollywood was involved. That's a historic hotel from a long time ago. You can look into it. There's other things as well. But anyway, so as Kyle was feeling the pressure to perform, he came out. I think the first thing that I remember was General Motors. He was trying to come out and be some type of a stock picker. And his General Motors pick failed. He was on TV. I remember seeing him on TV pitching General Motors. Oh, yeah, and this and oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, this is why it's just shocking to me. Like, you don't invest in an auto manufacturing company, certainly not a U.S. one. Okay, I mean, a typical auto manufacturing company. If you look at that, why would you? I wrote about this in the Wall Street Investment Bible: industries to buy, industries not to buy, and the automotive industry and the airline industry, they were two of the worst industries fundamentally. Now, there's obviously going to be opportunities, investment opportunities for a certain point. But generally speaking, why would you invest in the automotive industry, especially in the U.S., that is dealing with unfair trade rules, right? With all the competitors around the world, that's dealing with labor unions, dealing with many other things, right? In addition to a litany of poor management executives, terrible, a long history of terrible management, right? It's like, why would you do that? It doesn't make sense at all. You see, now, Kyle Bass, if he had just read one of my books, like the Wall Street Investment Bible, you would have seen a case study that I created, and that was based upon it was a summary, a short summary, basically, of a case that I made that presented to Blockbuster management to try and help them save themselves. Okay, and if you read that, call, you would have seen that I advised buying Netflix and shorting Blockbuster, right? And I've been bullish on Netflix ever since then, ever since that time, 2008, right? You would have been a superstar, Kyle. Or maybe if you had been a subscriber to my newsletter back early on when I wasn't even charging a different rate for professional investors, but you had big money back then, wouldn't matter to you. Or you could have given me a phone call, Kyle. My number one stock, right? I had three stocks, my three top picks for long-term growth in 2009, in May of 2009. You would have seen the number one stock that I listed was NVIDIA. And virtually nobody even knew about NVIDIA back in 2009. I was recommending it to my clients on Wall Street as early as 2001. Okay, because I saw what was going on and I had a vision for what would happen in the future. And I knew video was going to take over everything. I knew streaming was going to take over everything. I knew this in 2000 and 2001. Once the bandwidth issues, so on and so forth, and the costs, all these things I thought would take about 20 years. And NVIDIA had made its mark early on. It was a new company. I think it was maybe it went public in 1999 or something like that. And then you had a guy, the founder. He wasn't some business guy. He was a technology guy. Okay, he was an engineer. So electrical engineer. So anyway, Kyle, you could have made some heavy hitters like that. You could have been a big fund, Kyle. You could have been a genius. No one had to have known it was me making the calls. And I've made so many other calls as well, as my subscribers know. So many great calls. But Kyle, he picks General Motors. I don't know, was it 2013, 2014, something like that? And that collapsed. Turns out for Kyle that, wasn't long after he was on TV pitching General Motors that I think that something happened with the Chevy Volt or something blew up, and I don't know, something happened with the company and the stock went down a lot. And then of course Kyle was pitching the Argentina. He was looking for unlike Doug Casey, who was pitching the Argentina bullshit to get you to buy his overpriced scammy real estate, right? Kyle Bass had a different take, right? But it's similar. This is why, these guys kind of, they kind of in the same circles, you see. Financial Sense, getting back to Financial Sense, Kyle Bass was with Financial Sense shortly after he started fading. He wasn't doing shit. He starts offering his interviews for a paid service on Financial Sense with Jim Pavlova. scumbag Jim Pavlova, which, by the way, his investment firm, Jim Pavlova, their clearing company was Madoff Securities. That's right. So I want to advise everybody, encourage everybody, don't do business with Pavlova Securities, Financial Sense. These guys are clowns. They're complete clowns. These were the guys pitching hyperinflation and all this bullshit, okay? And I would not deal with them. By the way, if there's anyone out there who's lost money with Pavlova Securities or Peter Schiff or any of these other clowns out there, contact me. Let me know. Show me your statements. And there's maybe something that you can do about it. No promises. And let me just go ahead and state something, by the way. If I ever get anything from any of these clowns out there, who want to try and push me around or trash talk me, I'm talking about these clowns that are defrauding people who in one of various ways. I'm going to teach people how to sue all of you guys, okay? Or I'll just go to the regulators. Okay, because folks, if you think that the regulators know about all these scam artists out there, and here I'm not talking about Kyle Bass, I'm talking about the Doug Caseys of the world out there. They don't know what's going on anyway, and they don't even really care. So Kyle Bass, he pitched Argentina as it was going to turn around, was going to come back. Of course, it's a big bet. He wants to buy the Argentinian bonds at pennies on the dollar. Big bet. Once again, make the big bet. And if it turns around, for whatever reason, he looks like a genius, right? Well, it didn't work out that way. Didn't work out at all. Argentina, of course, became an even bigger disaster. Now, I don't know chronological order, but this is just from my memory. So I'm sure I'm going to miss a few, and the order's not going to be right. But it seems like after that, it was Japan, around 2014 maybe. Japan. Kyle Bass made this big bet against Japan. Remember that? And, of course, he took it's kind of like a sophomore, it's kind of a sophomoric approach, like, well, Japan has the highest debt in the world. They're going to default on their government bonds. And of course, if you had been a research subscriber, I actually explained and pointed out, I showed my research subscribers why it would be virtually impossible for Japan to have a sovereign debt crisis. And it's just shocking. Many people in the financial industry don't even understand it. You see, Kyle, the most important factor is that Japan, I guess he's short of the yen, is short of the Japanese government bonds. That didn't work out, did it, Kyle? No, it didn't. So what's next on the plate for Kyle? Well, Kyle decided to come out and be a drug patent troll. He teamed up with one of his tribesmen, apparently a infamous shyster in the industry, who's a patent troll. And he came out and said, look, these companies, Amgen and such, they're charging too much money. These patents are not valid, this and that, and all kinds of just nonsense. And basically his whole mantra was to the public, drug prices are too high, and I want to fight to make them lower because these patents are this and that and so forth. Now, of course, it sounds good, right? But Kyle, he wants to make money. He wants to get filthy rich off of this, right? He wants to short these stocks and challenge their patents. I mean, think about that. What a scumbag. What a scumbag. The ego on this guy and the nerve of this guy. Think about it. Like, and by the way, Kyle, if you had talked to me, of course, I have an extensive background in that realm. I would have told you you're wasting your time. In fact, there's a story I've told people many times. Maybe some of you have heard this. Back when Vioxx was recalled, I want to say 2005, let's just say roughly 2005, 2004, 2005. When Vioxx, of course, you all remember the Vioxx problem causing the deaths and so forth. When that was recalled, was a huge scandal. Merck's stock collapsed. I think it went as low as like low 20s, mid to low 20s. And I was actually out recommending people to buy anywhere from the around, say, I think 30, 31, 32, all the way down 20, 25 bucks, something like that. This is from my memory. I haven't thought about it since that time. And I remember I was talking to a biotechnology attorney, an attorney based in Massachusetts, in Boston, right? And Boston is probably the number two, I would say, safe to say, number two biotech capital of the world, right? Second only to San Diego. And so I was talking to him, and some would actually claim that Boston is the biotech capital. But anyway, he had been in the business for 50 years, I think, something close to that. And I was talking to him about that because we were doing some other business together. And he told me, he said, oh, Merck's going to go, they're going to file bankruptcy. They're not going to make it. They're not going to make it. And this wasn't immediately after. This is a while after, several months had passed. And I said, no, I don't believe it. I said, it's a great opportunity to invest in Merck. It's overhyped. And of course, it wasn't just, I looked at several things. Anyway, the bottom line is that what I'm trying to say is that even when you have someone who might seem to know a lot, it doesn't matter if they're an industry professional. At the end of the day, it matters what type of person you're dealing with, right? The intellect of that person. And I can tell you that for Kyle Bass to team up with this patent troll, to think this patent troll knows what's going on, was ludicrous. I mean, think about it. All these decades, and all of a sudden, no one else has been able to come out and basically thwart the whole patent system. But Kyle Bass is going to be able to do it. I mean, he's so naive. It just kind of makes you you wonder how stupid is the guy? Now, of course, Kyle, he didn't go to an Ivy League institution. He went to TCU in Fort Worth, and I don't know what he majored in, probably business or something. Business is the major that makes these people. I noticed, when people major in business, they typically, not always, undergrad, some people end up doing something else, but it instills this kind of this money worshiping greed. MBA, without a doubt. But anyway, Kyle had apparently a swimming scholarship. He didn't have an academic scholarship, a swimming scholarship. Well, it looks like, Kyle, that your swimming skills are going to come in handy, or should be coming in handy, because it seems like you're swimming to save your life in this world of bad calls. But so Kyle actually thought he was going to make money shorting these drug stocks, challenging their patents. Did he have a very large biotechnology, well-known biotechnology law firm with a huge team backing him? No. He had one guy who's probably looking to make money, to get some business. And so that was a flop. Complete flop, of course. And then after that, for several years, I guess maybe around starting 2016, maybe 17, probably 16, Kyle Bass starts talking about, this is, of course, after China already showed some problems in their with the yuan and in their credit markets. Kyle Bass comes out and says, I'm gonna short China. China's gonna have problems. Oh, this and the yuan, right? Remember that? And his yuan short was a complete bust. He lost his ass, of course. But he kept doing it several times and years after that. And then there was also one particular company, I think it was called UDF, a real estate investment trust in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. I can't remember where. I think it was North Dallas somewhere. And so he accused this real estate investment company of a Ponzi scheme, and basically saying, look, they're taking money from one of their funds and to pay investors from the other fund. And it didn't stop at that. Kyle Bass actually anonymously went on one of these websites and started posting all this information. Didn't say who he was. He started a website. Didn't announce who he was. He basically came out and was trashing this company, posting all types of unsubstantiated rumors about this company. He exaggerated a lot of things apparently, and to the extent that now the company was actually raided thereafter by the FBI, and so and in fact I think what had happened was I'm not positive, but what I think happened was that the company was already being investigated by the SEC. And so it appears to me that Kyle Bass, that was kind of the cue-in that he got from one of his little analysts. And then they looked at it, and then they kind of decided to make some claims about it. And of course, he had taken a short position in the stock. So apparently, the company paid a fine to the SEC for something I can't recall. You can look into the story. But after that, the company, Kyle Bass made like $35 million off the short, right? Because it would look like he's right? But what ended up happening is that Kyle Bass is being sued now by the company. Kyle Bass was being investigated by the SEC for what he had done, the wrongdoing. I don't know exactly what. You can look into it. And certainly the lawsuit is ongoing now. And apparently it's not looking good for Kyle. So think about it for a second. You got a guy who he's supposed to be this legendary investment visionary, and he's going after small little local real estate investment companies. And he's going out and he's spreading rumors anonymously. I mean, think about that. Wow, that's not good. So throughout this time, of course, he shorted the yuan many times, lost his ass, and then the latest thing was the Hong Kong, right? The Hong Kong dollar, right? You might recall approximately summer of 2020, he announced the launch of his of a Hong Kong dollar fund, something like that. He's going to short the Hong Kong dollar, claiming that the Hong Kong dollar is going to be decoupled from the U.S. dollar. Okay, and so it was a fund leveraged 200 times, huge bet, and of course the media comes out, oh yeah, he stands to make billions if he wins, and all this stuff. And so I mean, think about it once again. Obviously, Hong Kong. I mean, think about it, folks. If Kyle Bass had an inkling of knowing what's going on and he wanted to take some strategy like that, don't you think he would have done something before, right? Because, of course, the Hong Kong protests and riots, that had been going on, right? So, obviously, during that time that since they began, well, obviously, there's a chance that you could see some problems with Hong Kong, right? There's a possibility. It's not a crazy bet that there would be a problem with the Hong Kong dollar and the financial system, without a doubt, right? But Kyle Bass is basically the only guy to do it. Why is that? So he knows more than everybody in the world, right? You see? So he made this bet, and he got blown up. And so I'm going to go ahead and tell you the kind of the nuts and bolts of the story here. But I will try to make a separate video giving you the detail about this. It gets back to our initial headline. So apparently this fund, and it was funny because I remember I looked into it a little more after it was announced, and the sources said, well, they were undisclosed sources because they couldn't talk about who they were, how much money was involved, right? And now we see why. Turns out that the fund was only $30 million dedicated to the shorting the Hong Kong dollar. And by the way, that fund lost 95%. It lost essentially everything. Okay. But the big news here was that Kyle Bass received $100 million, and $30 million of that dollars went to that fund. That $100 million was from companies linked to Steve Bannon. And these companies actually raised the money illegally. They raised money through illegal securities offerings. And let me go ahead and show you here. because I pointed this out a couple of years ago, when I showed this guy, Guai Weiwei, I think his name is, and you may have seen the video on Vice, but I pointed out because he was appearing with Carl Bass on this Real Vision Finance. Now, you might recall I exposed the guy behind Real Vision. His name is Raoul Powell. The guy's a liar. He's a fraud. Let me repeat. Mr. Powell, you're a liar and you're a fraud. I've exposed that. You lied. You claimed when you were launching your boiler room scammy little media company, you made false claims about your background, about who you were. You claimed to have been a hedge fund manager at Goldman Sachs. It's not true. You were in the sales department, buddy. You're lying scumbag. So people, when you exaggerate who you are, right? Your track record, your credentials, when you exaggerate this, you're doing it to grow your business. That's fraud. You're intentionally deceiving people for financial gain. That's fraud, okay? And I've talked about this before. You think about what all these gold pumpers have been doing. Every single gold dealer, every single precious metals dealer out there who's chanting all this nonsense, they're committing fraud. That's fact. Write it down. They're committing fraud. That's right. They're all fraudsters. You can call them all a fraud. They're frauds. You can tell them. You can tell them I said so, and let's see them debate out of it. They can't do it. They can't. These guys would never come across me. You know that, folks. They're all chicken shits. But so I was wondering, like, what's going on here?
China philosophy is the last 4 years.
You know,
slogan, three
things.
One,
you had this guy, and then later on, of course, Steve Bannon appeared. And then you see the three of them. This Chinese guy with Bass, with Bannon. And I was wondering, something is weird here. And then, of course, we find out later on. Now, this guy, of course, the Chinese guy is allegedly a billionaire real estate mogul from China. Okay? I'm sure he's got plenty of money. How much, we don't know. But he's exiled from China. He's wanted by Interpol. And he's accused of bribing Chinese officials. Now, let me explain something. I'll get into this in the future, hopefully. But in case I don't, I'm going to give you a little rundown. Here's how it works in Asia in general, including China, probably South Korea to some degree, although not as much as before, and Japan to a much less degree, I would have to assume, than South Korea. Basically, the more advanced the country is, the less of it's going to go on. They're going to abide by the Western system, which has a different type of scam. But basically, here's how it works in all these countries in Asia, Southeast Asia anyway, right, and China. Okay, let me just go ahead. I'll say Thailand, Vietnam, China. I would say Malaysia as well. I don't know for sure. Indonesia, I would say as well. If you see people making all this money, but I point to China because you've got a lot of billionaires in China from real estate, the developers. So you ask yourself the question: China's a communist country, okay? Who owns the property? Well, I'm sure things have changed a little bit, but for the most part, I would have to guess that the Chinese really don't own the property. It's the Chinese government. So, you know, like in Vietnam, the true ownership is still, I believe, with the Vietnamese government. But nonetheless, my point is that you can imagine, how are these guys becoming real estate billionaires? How? They're paying off officials. That's how it works in these countries, folks. But you can't just pay off officials. Typically, you got to have your connections. Okay? That's how people in Asia get rich. They pay off officials. The officials are silent partners in the business. The officials control the real estate. They determine to what extent, whether or not, and what price certain properties are going to be sold. You understand? They determine everything. They can tip off individuals as to whether there's going to be a new metro system going through a certain property, right? You understand. This is how it works in Asia. This is normal, okay? This is a part of their system. And so this individual, this Chinese real estate mogul, is accused of paying off officials. And apparently China supposedly wants to fight corruption. They're trying to stop this. I'm not going to go into that. But he's wanted on several charges. Now, if you listen to the guy talk, he seems a little believable. But I believe the guy's a con man and a fraudster. I believe that most people are going to think that he knows what he's talking about and he's being honest because it's kind of like the Alex Jones con man effect. You speak a little truth here and a little truth there, and people they believe you, right? So he speaks enough truth, but I think at the end of the day, he's a fraudster. And then you'd look and see who he's associated with. Well, Kyle Bass is associated with him. Steve Bannon is associated with him. Well, what's that say about Bannon and Kyle Bass? Or what's that say about this guy, right? Or what's that say about, think about it, all these guys associated with this Raoul Paul fraudster, right? So what's that say about all these people, folks? That's why I told you in the beginning, and I keep saying it, it's very important to be able to determine if a person is truly solid, if they're legitimate, if they're honest, if they're not a con or a fraudster. If you can determine these con artists, fraudsters, something shady about these guys, then it's going to save you so much money, so much time, so much effort, and you can spot so many more of them. Because some of these guys, they go undetected. It's hard to detect them. But if you see who they're hanging out with, well, there you go. It's much easier to spot them. Okay? So here's the guy, this Raoul Pal fraudster, is a complete liar. He didn't predict the financial crisis. That's what he claims. He predicted the financial crisis. Complete lie. And he did this to boost his stupid little propaganda company.
So even though we're still seeing
right?
decent retail sales
and of course,
numbers,
he's also selling,
my guess
and now
is
he's trying to sell
later we will see
so-called
less.
research.
Now you've just added
See, he
yet
positions his
more
company
COVID
as
complications.
it's a media bullshit company
Europe,
that supposedly also
that
sells
doesn't
research
look
and deals
good
with
right
institutions,
now, and
financial
Germany's
institutions.
talking about
That's
do
bullshit.
they do
Maybe some
lockdown,
institutions,
some
because he's in the tribe.
full
This guy's in the
lockdown.
tribe. He's
I
got
look at
buddies.
the
Maybe
chart
he
of the
passes it
Spanish
to these
stock market.
guys
It seems to be
for
breaking
free.
lower.
But
So
he
there's
doesn't have
something
real
going on
clients
out there.
in institutions.
But
He doesn't.
equity
I can
markets
guarantee you
tend
that.
not to crack
Unless they're fucking idiots. Because this
until
guy is a chump.
the
Look at him, Mr. Rainbow.
purchasing managers
Are you gay?
indexes go or indices go below 50
Look,
or head
he's
towards
pumping
that level.
Bitcoin and all this other nonsense.
So
He's not a
this
legitimate person. He talks about all the doom and gloom, all the broken clock garbage. So when you understand that, then you see who he has on. Then you know every single person that he has on is not credible, or is just a liar or a fraudster. That's the way I see it. That's the way you should see it if you want to know what's going on. So I will hopefully cover more of this in the future. The bottom line is that this guy, the Chinese guy, the media companies he's involved with, they raise money illegally through illegal cryptocurrency offerings, securities offerings, I think more than $500 million. And they did this supposedly with the intent to start a media company to fight so-called China propaganda, right? And I say so-called because, of course, China is a propaganda machine. But how can you call China, how can you mention China propaganda when this guy, I believe, is full of propaganda himself, right? And it goes back, folks, to the whole thing about raise money to be a higher force. We're going to defeat everybody. We're going to have free media, free platform, right? Remember the David Icke media platform scam several years ago? And then he teamed up with Brian Rose, similar tribesmen, to do the same thing, to scam people. Now I'll cover Rose. I know about Rose. I spotted Rose, Brian Rose, as a fraudster, lying scumbag more than 10 years ago. I think about 10 years ago. Okay. And I haven't had a chance to cover him, but I'll be going over him in the future. Fortunately, there have been other people. That's another reason why I haven't exposed him, is because fortunately other people have gone ahead and exposed this guy. But anyway, so this didn't go off as I intended. I intended to focus on on Bass and this billionaire and Steve Bannon, but I talked about some other things. But I think this type of a background material kind of gives you a better flavor. And in the future, of course, I plan on having something specifically targeted to this scam, which, of course, the SEC busted, and they had to pay, I think, $487 million, return all the money. I mean, you know, and by the way, Kyle Bass didn't get in trouble. I mean, think about that for a second. Kyle Bass is buddies with this guy. He's buddying up with this guy. How did Kyle Bass not know where this money came from? I'm willing to bet that he did. And the SEC's not even investigating? I mean, what's going on? I mean, seriously? Really?
terms of getting back as an investor, if it's coming down to here, almost irrespective of what's going on, I have to believe. If I have to make a call in advance, and of course I can change depending on what happens, but I have to believe this is where you want to start doing that 18, 17, around there. Their earnings report is a complete game changer, at least for quite a while. Bottom line, NVIDIA now is going to enter the realm of Tesla, Apple, and all these other big, I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works. I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works.